What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports NFL Podcast. I'm Brinson here with Brady Quinn and legend Douzable. It's a Tuesdays with Brady. Pew, pew, pew. Man, we've really changed the background. You guys are usually in a studio, but they're doing construction, and I'm usually in front of a bookshelf with a bunch of crap in front of it on it, and instead I'm got a bar behind me. Might start.
Yeah, Bob's house, right? Brinson.
Bob's, yeah, Bob's house. That's right. Bob and Ann Brinson. Shout out to Bob and Ann. Hello, Mom. I know you're watching. I'm sure you're watching live. Maybe could have turned on the AC a little earlier. It's kind of toasty in here, Mom. But
it should be a comfortable temperature outside where you're at, right?
It feels great outside. The one of the aspects of this house that I love. There's like a cool sun porch out there. And there's a bunch of big windows here, but the way the sun rises, I don't know if you know, the sun rises the same spot every day. It actually beats down into these windows and heats up the house very quickly. So I will be pulling a countrified risky business shortly, sliding on the hardwoods in my boxers and my slippers shortly.
That sounds childish.
It does sound childish.
Yeah, you gotta let one of those windows down, get some of that fresh breeze inside the house.
I could open up the door and get the screen porch. So we get a little flowing going on here.
There you go. Get the hair going in the wind too.
Oh yeah, that's actually not a bad idea. I might do that. Okay, let's get to some headlines. We're gonna talk some.
Oh, before we go, Will, I owe you an apology.
Oh, that never happens.
I was actually in the neck of the woods, but I was so locked in. I had the ECU Charlotte game.
Oh, I'm sorry you had to call that crap
because I had to fly into Raleigh, and I didn't even think about it. I was like, I should have hit Brinson up.
Yeah, no, that's all good. Chris Hassel did the same thing when he flew because you know what happens is you're thinking I'm going to Greenville, and you don't really think about it. By the way, that game, my brother's an ECU fan. Tough watch, that ECU Charlotte game, huh?
It's a tough call.
Yeah,
it was
like
defensive
10-70.
battle.
Like
I'm a defensive-minded guy, so it was great for me. But I bet most fans, it was tough for them to sit and watch that game.
Yeah, my brother and I have like a weird so like I'm an NC State fan, ECU fan. The fan bases hate each other, right? Like ECU fans and State fans don't like each other.
They do.
We have this weird sort of it's like we'll taunt each other a little bit, but it's like it's to the point ECU's so bad I don't even want to like bring it up. I'm like, hey, so down in Greenville for that Charlotte game, or he's like, but yeah, all good. Next time, that's it. What'd you think about Greenville, dude? Had you been there before? I guess you had, right? Surely like UCF had played Greenville, ECU, maybe not. I can't keep realignment straight anymore.
Yeah, so I've played there a few times. I played there my sophomore year, my senior year. Actually won sophomore year, lost senior year, but we ended up winning the conference that year. So they have a really good fan base. Even though they've been struggling this year, it was homecoming, so a lot of fans were still out there. I had the opportunity to talk to a few alum, a few former players, just about the history. I don't think, Brady, maybe you know this or you don't because you're a historian like myself. But ECU, especially in the 80s, man, they used to play some of the top teams in the nation and compete with some of them. They had, I think, a magical season, the 83 season, where they played like 3 top 10 teams and finished the year in the top 20. So
it was the Peach Bowl that year, right?
Players, some guys that played in the 80s about that.
I literally played in a golf tournament. I played in a golf tournament where a guy, before the season started, he's a huge ECU fan. I think he might have played there back in the day during the era you're talking about. And he talked about how good they were and all this stuff. He's like, I'm telling you right now, take the points at ECU and bet that money line. He's like, they're going to shock the world and upset Michigan this season. And I was like, man, all right. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go on TV and say that, but I was like, I could see it. I could see a scenario like Harbaugh's out the first few weeks, maybe they struggle a little bit. And he's like, yeah, man, I'm telling you, take that money line. He's like, ECU's going to shock the world. He's like yelling this in the clubhouse. And everyone's like, that guy's drunk. Somebody needs to cut him off. So that was the end of that. But I don't think it worked out too well this season.
No, they got stomped. I think the Harbaugh being out thing was worse for them because Michigan's like, oh, that's cool. We're just going to flex on whoever we've got. Who is it? Some like Western Carolina week 1. Although I guess Michigan shouldn't take Carolina directional schools lightly after losing to Appalachian State.
I mean, I will say this: ECU did cover. They only won 30-3, so they did cover. He wasn't wrong, But the money line
I think they
was a
did.
bit aggressive. Right?
Money line was a touch aggressive.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to some headlines. We'll talk some trade deadline. We will talk some Deshaun Watson as well, because I have questions for Brady. I'm going to lead Brady. I'm going to lead Brady into giving me a quote for a column I'm going to write about Deshaun Watson, and we'll see if I can do that magically through the power of internet television here shortly. But first, Brock Purdy, Brady is there's no chance of Cinderella. This isn't like a Cinderella story, right? The last 2 weeks, I know that like the SI Fan Nation or whatever that does the 49ers, like the guy suggested if Brock Purdy didn't play well this week, he might get benched for Sam Darnold, which is a touch ridiculous, right?
I mean, I don't see it. Look, a couple bad games. By the way, you want to get up against the Browns, who are arguably one of the best defenses, if not the best in the NFL. Okay, you lost Christian McCaffrey for a portion of that game. Trent Williams, Debo, we know that. This past week, I mean, I'd have more concerns. I came away from watching that what was it, Sunday night game? I came away
Monday night,
excuse me. More looking at it saying like, dude, the 49ers give up like 400 yards on defense. Like, that was what was more surprising to me. Like, in the end, if you're upset about the interceptions, like, what do you want Brock to do, right? I don't care what quarterback you're talking about. Like, at the end of the game, do you not want him trying to throw balls in the tight windows? He's got to throw the football to get his team back into it. So the first one didn't look great. The last one was kind of out of desperation. You got to make that throw, unfortunately, when you're in that position. So it is what it is. But I think he's fine. I think he will be fine. It just, look, he's played with a lot of dynamic pieces around him. Some that's been taken away. The Vikings scheme's tough to go up against. Brian Flores gives you a lot of different looks. You shouldn't lose faith. I think he'll be fine. He's still a young player in this league, too, growing into the quarterback that he's going to be. So I wasn't overly concerned with it, at least from the Brock Purdy standpoint of it. I just think we were bound to see him have an off day at some point, and you've probably seen that the past couple of weeks. I mean, he's been on fire ever since he started starting for the 49ers.
And dudes, I heard Joe Buck. So two comments about this game interested me. One, Joe Buck said that Kyle Shanahan was like really like legitimately upset that this is a game Deebo Samuel had to miss, because against that Brian Flores defense, Deebo's a guy where you can kind of beat the blitz by getting the ball in the short yardage stuff and letting him take off. And then Harrison Smith, Notre Dame guy, Brady, was on the Pat McAfee show, and I heard him talking and just basically saying that like it's taken them a few weeks kind of to, like they feel like they're kind of getting Brian Flores' defense more now than they had been in the early part of the season. That like a lot of the language, a lot of the concepts that they were doing were not like, I mean, Harrison Smith's been around the block, and like he was like, some of this stuff was really foreign to me. It's stuff I wasn't used to doing. Like, as a defender, is that, I think that probably flies under the radar. You switch schemes, so you go from Ed Donatel to Brian Flores. Like, how difficult is that to pick up? And is that like that's a real thing, right?
Yeah. If you think about it, it's going to take a little time to get the nuances and terminology down when you're in a new defense, especially a guy like Brian Flores, who routinely likes to blitz, right? So he likes to give you different looks. He'll blitz and go man, blitz and go zone. So like you said, even Harrison Smith, who's been around the block for a long time, right? He's had different defensive coordinators. He said it took him a while to get the terminology and get this defense down. So I think you're starting to see the last few weeks. We knew that this Vikings defense was the Achilles heel last year, right? They were awful in pass defense. But a guy that, I want to circle, Cam Bynum. I mean, he had a ridiculous game against the 49ers on Sunday night. I mean, those two interceptions, to Brady's point, right? Brock Purdy, like, you're happy when he throws in anticipation of those tight windows, but when somebody makes a play on the ball, you're upset with him. So, like, what is Brock Purdy supposed to do in those situations? I think Cam Bynum just made two really great plays, and then he also forced a fumble earlier in the game versus Christian McCaffrey to get that fumble recovery. So they had a great game plan, right? They weren't going to let Christian McCaffrey beat them running the ball. Now, he did beat them on a screen for an explosive touchdown, but they were going to force Brock Purdy without Deebo Samuel, without Trent Williams at left tackle, to go down and have methodical drives and score at the end of those drives. But I'm like, Brady, we could talk about, the Vikings game plan against the 49ers offense. I think the biggest surprise was how the Vikings, without their number one receiver, right, with Jordan Addison, who essentially has become their number two, out for at least most of the third quarter and fourth quarter, Kirk Cousins put up almost 400 yards throwing the ball against them. I don't think anybody saw that happening. So, I mean, Brady, your Vikings pick for the division, you turn back and look, I think they're only a game and a half behind, the Detroit Lions now. So everybody's willing to say that this team should sell. They should sell everybody. Everybody should get traded. Kirk Cousins, JJ, Danielle Hunter, sell everybody. Now, if you look at it, especially in the NFC, with it being a down year, the Vikings, and if you look at I think their next 4 games are, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they play the Chicago Bears. I believe they play the Denver Broncos. They play the Atlanta Falcons.
Or did they already play the Panthers?
Green Bay and New Orleans. They got Atlanta again. I think they have Atlanta coming up, right?
The point is they can get back into it. They haven't played many divisional games, so it's going to be big in that respect. This week's going to be huge in that respect, going to Green Bay. I want to go back to the difficulty when you talk about Harrison Smith and learning a new defense, especially for a safety position, because they do ask him to do a lot of different things, right? Whether it's playing deep half, deep middle, and coverage down in the box as more of a force defender, or even blitzing. The game I got to call, he ended up having game-sealing sacks as a blitzer, as a safety. So it's a large departure from what they were asked to do last year under Ed Donatel, in the sense of, how they're playing more of that shell coverage and not quite as aggressive with the way they were presenting some of those pressures. One of the things that you look at that I love is kind of like diving deep in the X's and O's, is how they go about doing it with those all-up looks, right? That's what the offense calls it when you get a defense that's got the 4-down lineman, but then you got, 2 guys in the A-gap, a guy out on the edge, and you're trying to decipher, like, who's coming, who's not, because we've got to figure out how we're using our 5 offensive linemen and a tight end and a running back in protection, or either or of those guys, depending on who's in protection. And one of the things that they'll do based on that, and it takes a while to get comfortable with it, is you've got your quarterbacks playing off, but they've got eyes. They can feel the obviously the receiver, but they can also look through to the quarterback. And what they're doing is they're going to look to see which way the line slides, because whichever way the line slides, if it's sliding away from them, they know they're going to get the free runner from that side. And that free run is going to force the football out faster to their side. Most offenses coach their quarterbacks to throw into pressure. So if you're a quarterback back there and you're looking at all these guys, you don't know which one's coming. If you've got a 6-man protection, it looks like there might be 7 coming. You're going to basically say, I'm putting the line this way. I've got these guys on these guys. And if there's a free defender, it's going to be that guy. And if that guy comes, I have my quick answer to that side of the field. That's typically how it's played. And what's hard is the way Brian Flores and the Vikings defense mixes up their looks, mixes up their pressures. It makes it hard to decipher, because they're not just going to allow you to get a beat on it every single time you come out on 3rd down or must-pass situations. And so because of that, it's allowed them to be more opportunistic in the way they've gone about getting turnovers, getting pressure, and also confusing quarterbacks after the snap of the football, and then try to jump different routes. So anytime you can slow up a quarterback's thought process after the snap of the football, that's what allows a defense, to me, to be most effective.
Conversely, too, like, just to, and I guess ironically, it was Cousins had one where, I think it was Cousins, right? He shifted the protection to the right, and then, like, they blitz from the left side. He's like, ah! And you could hear him scream. He's just like, and he just whips it out. I think it was CJ Hawkins there.
Yeah, you get full time. And really, when you've got those 2 guys in the A-gap, and Leger knows this, I mean, with both backers, really what they're going to do is they're going to see which way the center drops and sets. And whichever way he sets,
correct,
the linebacker that side is going to drop. The other guy's going to run through the A-gap, right? And it's one of the reasons why, like, what you started to evolve in doing as an offensive line in your protection scheme was, you'd say, like, I don't care who's in the A-gaps. Like, the offensive line is going to have one of those guys. The back has the other, right? We don't want our back being on an edge defender or a bigger guy than him. We want big on big. Right. So as long as the quarterback's in shotgun, that running back has time to get up there and end up blocking that linebacker, or really whichever one would end up coming through in that case. The offensive line kind of sets with a little more depth, and then they're able to slide to whichever side. You kind of jelly set, and hopefully they can pass off some of those different rushes. The problem is, when you start incorporating games, twists, stunts, the way they slant, ETs, Ts, that's what gets complicated, because then you've got to get guys who have enough time to work together to pass all those games off. Fortunately, for example, with an offensive line like the Vikings that had struggled earlier this year, they put Dalton Reisner at left guard, Ezra Cleveland out, and they don't give up a sack. They actually handled a lot of the stunts and games from San Francisco pretty darn well. I know we're talking about the other side of the ball here, but that's just an example of that.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
not allowing us.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up, Brady, because we actually had the conversation last week talking about offensive line play and how it hasn't been as good. And I thought this was a underlying signing. Dalton Reisner, they got him in, well, not in the middle of the season, but it was about 3 or 4 games into the season. I think he's really fortified that inside. Ed Ingram has played well. Something that hasn't been talked about enough, I think the Vikings have 2 of the best tackles in all of football. We talk about Brian O'Neill being a really good offensive tackle, and then Christian Darrisaw is going to be a superstar in the future. So for them to go up against that gauntlet that is the 49ers and not give up a sack, guys, and it wasn't like Kirk Cousins wasn't dropping back and passing. It was almost like 7-on-7 out there, the way he was playing quarterback. So he dropped back a lot in that game. For him not to, he said he felt the rush, but watching the game, Brady, it didn't seem like he felt the rush. Or he was comfortable back there. You got to give a kudos to the offensive line, especially that interior with Javon Hargrave, the way he's played throughout the season. I think Dalton Reisner has really fortified the interior of the interior 3 of that offensive line.
Yeah, remember he came from Denver, where he was with the offensive line coach. They're now in Minnesota, Chris Cooper, who was with Mike Munchak. So a lot of familiarity with what they're asking them to do from a protection and run blocking standpoint.
And Mike Munchak, just one of those guys that, I mean, it's like him and Brian Callahan, where it's like you get like the tutelage of either of those 2 guys, you're just going to have an offensive line that overperforms. PFF at PFF Zoltan points out this is after this game. There's only one offensive lineman in the entire NFL who's played more than 100 pass plays and has yet to allow a single pressure. And that offensive lineman is who's that? Is that NC State's own Garrett Bradbury? That's right, former 3-star tight end.
And they missed him when Austin Schloman was in. It was a little bit different. They missed him. Schloman did a decent job, but Bradbury's the better player. Yeah. Clearly, there's a reason why when he's back, they've been better.
Definitely.
Yep. And I wrote about this actually too after they beat the Bears last week. I was like, to be perfectly frank, I was like stretching for topics out of the 1:00 games and like couldn't really think of one as my secondary topic. And I went with maybe the Vikings aren't dead yet. And I was like, I don't know if I really believe this. But you beat the Niners, and Aaron Rodgers talked about this on the McAfee show too. Is like because he was asked about Jordan Love, and he sort of deflected a little bit, and by saying he's like, "What do you think about the Packers?" And he didn't want to say. I don't think he wanted to talk about Jordan Love. But he's like, "Look at the Vikings. This is a week-to-week league. A week ago, it's like, yeah, they beat the Bears, but it's time to sell everybody. Trade Kirk Cousins. Like, should they trade Justin Jefferson? I floated that on this podcast, like not that seriously, but it was like, and then now it's like, whoa, the Vikings just beat the Niners. They're now 3-4. They are at the Packers, at the Falcons, versus the Saints, at the Broncos, and versus the Bears before their Week 13 bye. They won't be more than a 3-point dog, probably more than a 1-point dog in any of those games, and they're likely to be favored. Then you get Justin Jefferson back, and the defense is starting to play well. Like, the Vikings look like they could be a potential playoff team, and it's just a reminder of like how quickly things move in the NFL.
It's crazy, right? Because what's the record? 4-3 now, if I'm not mistaken.
3-4. Who is Minnesota's 3-4?
3-4.
Yep.
And
but
last year,
honestly, like you said,
hold on. So last year they were 9-0 in 1-score games.
11-0.
Correct.
11-0, excuse me.
Yeah.
They're right now 3-4 because they've played all 1-score games.
Every single game.
Every single game has been a 1-score game.
Fast forward to the 2-minute warning and then let Kirk Cousins either drive down and score or not.
That's been their season.
Like, I think we talked about that. Yeah, we talked about that last week, right? Because we were saying that's not sustainable. Like when they did it last year, I was like, there's no way you could do that in back-to-back years. And we see this year, they've won, 3 out of the 7 games they've been in 1-score games. And if you look at the next 5 games, like you said, Will, honestly, they're going to either be favored or they're going to be within 3 points on the spread. So they literally could win all 5, or they could go 4-1 over the next 5. And then we're talking about, they play Detroit late twice in the year. We're talking about those two games being pivotal for whoever wins the division.
Yep, no doubt about it. Okay, so the Cleveland Browns are in a fascinating position because they traded for Deshaun Watson, gave up a bunch of first-round picks for him, gave him this insane, fully guaranteed contract that the rest of the NFL is like, nah, that ain't going to be the way the things work moving forward. Lamar Jackson tries to get it. Nope. Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert don't even try to bother trying to get it. And because of that, Deshaun Watson sort of has the Browns bent over a barrel in terms of deciding when or where he's going to play. I mean, that's probably poor phrasing. Sorry. But the point being is,
Jesus.
Well, he gets to decide what he wants to do, when he wants to play, if he wants to play. He's got a rotator cuff injury. Right. And I think what's really interesting about this scenario is that Deshaun was medically cleared before week 4 against the Ravens. Decides he tells Kevin Stefanski, I can't play. Kevin Stefanski told everybody, Deshaun knows his body. He knows how he feels. He knows whether or not he can play. He doesn't play. They have their bye. He's still medically cleared because he didn't play in week 4 and he had a bye. And then week 6 doesn't play against San Francisco. Again, medically cleared, doesn't do it. Comes back and plays in week 7 against the Titans. Or no, excuse me, against the Colts. Attempts 5 passes and hurt himself in week 3 against the Titans is what I meant. 5 passes and pulls himself out of the game because he can't drive the ball. There's all this chatter about Deshaun, including Brady, on your radio show on Fox Sports Radio, where I believe you called him. He's like a kid with
easy. So here's the problem with this: is what happens in social media before you go there. The context.
Your radio show tweeted it out for the record.
For the record, they did, and I said this on our radio show. This is part of the problem with social media. It's part of the problem where you have people who want to chime in because they listen to a 2-minute soundbite, and there was a reference made of him being a trust fund kid, right? And we kind of brought that up in the conversation of talking about the scenario of when you sign a player to a deal like that. And mind you, we talked about this today on the radio. I'm sure it won't get picked up. I'm sure no one will clip this off for us at CBS. What Deshaun Watson did in signing that contract is probably the greatest, most progressive move we've ever seen for any NFL player ever. Like literally.
For sure.
He's done more to move the ball forward in regards to the conversation about guaranteed contracts than anyone in the history of the NFL. Okay? So that one thing can be true. And you can also then look at how things have gone since he signed that contract and say that there's also, because of how it's gone, probably a lot of owners who are looking at saying, I don't ever want to do that now.
Yep.
Because of how things are being orchestrated. And I think my whole point was, I said, look, when you hit the jackpot, and I just asked this funny to Noah, our producer. I said, hey, if you won the jackpot, got $230 million in your pocket. I was like, are you coming into work tomorrow? He goes, no. I go, yeah, no crap. No different than any other trust fund kid who finds out their dad just left them $230 million. You're not as motivated to be out there. And so all of a sudden people take it like, oh, that's a shot at Deshaun Watson. It's not a shot at Deshaun Watson. It's a shot at the fact that we're all humans. If you got $230 million guaranteed, there would be elements where you say, yeah, if I'm not 100%, I'm not going out there. We have basketball players who get guaranteed contracts. And when they're not, it's load management. And what do the owners say in response to that, Leger? Nothing. They can't say anything.
They can't say anything.
And so they're trying to implement fine systems, all this stuff. And so the general point of it, which all we clipped off was just the trust fund thing, is when you have a contract like that, and this is really the first we've ever seen like it. So we're kind of seeing how it's going to play out in real time and whether or not any other agent, any other player are able to get an owner to do this. It then becomes difficult to do because of what's going on right now. Now, look, I went to Deshaun Watson, and I guess you can't say the Browns doctors because they've cleared him. His maybe on personal doctors or his agent and how he's leaking stuff to Schefter. He's kind of putting stuff out there. Because the timeline was 4 to 6 weeks. Well, the initial injury happened back in September. It's been over a month now. And so all I've ever pointed out was the fact that Kenny Pickett was dealing with an injury, came back, was able to play versus the Baltimore Ravens, and was able to get a win, fighting through stuff. Joe Burrow, who just signed a big deal, had no business starting the season. He started the season in the same division. He started the season, played through it, didn't look great. Honestly, probably should have sat out, didn't. Played through it, and still now has his team in a much better spot. Lamar Jackson's played through stuff. There's been plenty of countless examples of guys playing through stuff. My only point was it's got to be hard for a lot of other guys who are on the Browns right now, who are playing through stuff, who aren't fortunate enough to have that 5-year fully guaranteed deal. There's only, he's the only player ever, but there's probably only a handful of players in the league that have security beyond this year or maybe 2 years. And so the general point, and what we had talked about in the discussion that doesn't get clipped off or talked about, and surely doesn't make anyone talk about on Twitter or X, whatever you're calling it, is the fact that when you sign a deal like that, it puts all the control to the player. Correct. And then the player gets to kind of determine when he wants to play and what he wants to do because it's all guaranteed. And the Browns really don't have much of a say in it.
For instance, if I got a $230 million, if I scratch off a lottery ticket or I win the Powerball and I get $230 million and I'm visiting my parents and producer Harry's like, hey, I need you to hop on and record this for the social media team. I'm like, I'm good. You know what? I'm good.
I'm good.
I think
I'm jumping on, Brent.
Yeah. I'm like, maybe you get Breach to do that because I just got $230 million and I don't need
By the way, this isn't hate or jealousy. It's none of that. Like, I'm happy for him. I'm happy he's pushed the ball forward for players in the NFL, quarterbacks in particular.
Correct.
I think as a Browns fan, because I grew up a Browns fan, it's disappointing. I think we talked about, how I talked to people in the front office before the season. They were kind of selling me on the top 5 quarterback thing. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, he had one really great season, led the league in yards and all that, but their team didn't win. So I wasn't kind of really sure what it would look like. I'm like, well, we'll see how he comes back through everything he's been through. And the other thing I'll throw out there is forget about the shoulder stuff too. He's been through a lot of personal stuff that's come out there. And I know I've made light of it on social media because honestly, that's what we should do. It's social media.
Social media used to be fun. It used to be jokey and fun.
Seriously. Like if you want to take stuff serious, go watch the news. Go see what's going on in the rest of the world right now. Then we can have a serious conversation. But if you honestly feel like you can't joke around and have fun with some stuff on social media, you don't have a sense of humor and you're probably not built for social media. So my whole thing is like, it's not hating or anything else like that. It's disappointment, I think, for a Browns team that, just for starters, I picked to go to the playoffs this year. All right. I picked them to be a playoff team. And I think the way they're playing defensively and running the football and the pieces they have to throw to, they could be a playoff team. They could go to a Super Bowl. They could challenge the Chiefs. Like we saw them challenge the Chiefs back when Baker was there. And so if Deshaun can be what he was in Houston, they should be able to compete for a Super Bowl or for an AFC championship. But yet again, no one ever hear that. No one ever hears the clips and things we talk about.
Dudes,
thanks for bringing
which one is your favorite headline of the ones I'm going to read here? Brady Quinn, an epic Twitter feud with Deshaun Watson's trainer. That's the New York Post. Browns Wire, former Browns QB Brady Quinn gets into Twitter spat with Deshaun Watson's QB trainer. Outkick the coverage. Brady Quinn eviscerates Deshaun Watson's number one fanboy with gripping criticism. And finally, Barstool Sports. Brady Quinn utterly humiliated Deshaun Watson and his private QB coach.
So let me
humiliate, eviscerates, Lord,
annihilates.
Who gets the most credit from all this? It's his quarterback coach.
Yeah,
that's the funny thing about this is the people who end up getting the most credit about it is the quarterback coach. Like he started this beef, and now he's got literally, I think that tweet probably has millions of views. But like he's the one that wins off this. It's not Deshaun.
Nobody even knew he was Deshaun Watson's quarterback coach before this.
I have to deal with everyone asking me questions.
Well, we did. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So in regards to the topics, those are some interesting headlines. Eviscerate, humiliate. The only thing that was missing was destroy. But somebody said humbles. I guess humbles this quarterback coach. I think eviscerate's a very strong word. Yeah. and like Brady said, he made light of the situation. Now, again, not being sensitive, I get if Deshaun feels a way about that just because that was a serious part of his life. But in regards to what you were saying, Brady, you're right. They never want to clip out the whole conversation. They're only going to clip what's going to give you views on Twitter or on Instagram, right? So, and if you look at this, me and Brady were actually having this conversation about Deshaun before we actually came on the show. He's in a situation where, like you said, the $230 million, if he's not all the way healthy and he goes out there and plays like trash, right? We talked about the mental aspect of this, right? And we don't know where he is mentally, but you would assume going through what all he went through in the offseason, like we saw Baker Mayfield give it up for the team, right? Just before he got there. And what they do, Brady and Will, they still got rid of him. Right, because he didn't play well, wouldn't hurt.
They didn't reward him for it.
Where it's
they
different.
didn't reward him for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's different because Deshaun has the money, but it's like in his head, he's like, they're already tearing me down. If I go out there and look like he did versus the Colts, which he shouldn't have been out there, I think anybody that watched that game for 5 minutes realized he should.
But hold on. Here's the truth. Has he played well last year when he got here or this year so far?
No. He's had one good game since he was traded to the Browns, and he got hurt
really well. Yeah,
the Titans game he played well, and he got hurt in that game.
You would think, I mean, and we're not genies in the bottle, right? You would think him getting more used to that offense. We talked about it last year. He came back with the 6 games. When you miss a year and a half, Brady, you know this. You miss a year and a half of football, you're going to stink for probably 6 or 7 weeks anyway. So he did come back. He had training camp. Didn't look too well the first 2 weeks, but he did start looking good in week 3. Then the shoulder injury happened. So, I mean, this guy's missed what? 2+ years of football
Again,
still.
but like it's his own fault of why he missed some of that. I mean, he chose not to play for the Texans. That's part of it. And then obviously the other things that he did off the field put him in that position. But the reality is too, it wasn't like he wasn't with the Browns last year. He was able to practice before he even got there and was able to kind of start for the team and play for the team. So again, here's the problem is when you sign that big of a deal too, more pressure is added to that, right? There's higher expectations when you're compensated what you're compensated for the job that he's doing. And look, again, I speak from someone who grew up in Ohio, who grew up a Browns fan. Like that's the expectation of it. I think a lot of people, they kind of cast away anything off the field and they're like, yeah, I'm buying in because I want to win a Super Bowl, right? That's all they cared about.
Yeah.
And so when you saw last year's play and then this year's play so far, you're kind of like, all right, it's a little tougher pill to swallow because they do look at this team and they're like, we just need a guy in there to not turn the football over, hand the football off, and manage the game, and we can win a lot of football games that way.
Hey, you know who'd be good in that spot? Baker Mayfield. Just saying, be a lot cheaper.
Yeah, but they got rid of him.
Would the Browns be better off with Baker Mayfield than Deshaun Watson?
Deshaun said too.
You got all the picks you traded, all the money you gave up, the PR hit that you took, and frankly, it wasn't as bad as it should have been, considering what the off-field stuff was. Like all of that goes into play, and like to me, Baker's playing better football with Tampa Bay than Deshaun is with Cleveland. You'd be better off having Baker Mayfield. I bet Kevin Stefanski agrees, but that's neither here nor there because you can't reverse that. What we can do is take a break, and we come back, discuss some possible trades we'd like to see ahead of Halloween spooky trade deadline. We'll do that next.
We need the sports news anywhere.
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
Trades are like one of the most, Brady, you always, I know you don't like to talk about hot seats because we're talking about people's jobs and livelihoods, and it's fair. Trades too is like, it's like, oh, look at this fun trade, but then you're like, wow, you forget that this person who gets traded has to like ship their entire family. Like it's like in the middle of the season, get up and like go meet new friends and like a new life. I mean, like you always talk about like you don't want to change school, like you don't want to move your kids, change schools, like midway through the year. I mean, it's sort of the same thing, right? But for professionals. However, having said all that, I'm here for some fake trades. Brady, how come there weren't as many trades? How come we didn't have midseason? Do you like the trade? Do you guys like the trade deadline the way it is, where there's more action, more moving? Part of that is, of course, because you've got salary cap and the CBA and like the construction of rosters makes it easier to trade guys. But it was also like I would venture a guess that we don't see as much action as people are suggesting we could see in a week from now.
I don't think we ever do because I think, you look at it and you say from the team's perspective, when you have a player, I think there's two rules of thought. One is making this deal when we're giving up a veteran piece that we know can produce. That's why there's an offer or multiple offers for the player. How is this going to set us up? Like, what are we getting back in return to set us up for the future? Because if not, then like we're kind of killing what we've got now. And it surely sends a bad message to the rest of our locker room. Like that's one of the things I think I get concerned about the Titans moving forward. Like you trade Kevin Byard, he's one of the best safeties in the NFL, a leader on that team. There's rumors of Derrick Henry, DeAndre Hopkins. You move on from a couple more pieces. It's like, as a player in the locker room, like, shoot, man, all right. Like, what are we thinking right now? And obviously Malik Willis and Will Levis might both play. Maybe one starts the other. We'll see. We'll find out what happens this weekend. But the point is when the team starts thinking about and making moves, thinking about the future, players then start thinking about the future and what that means moving forward. So I think we tend to not get always, a bunch of action and deals because, you're not at a period of time where everyone might be in on the action and having those conversations for trading for a player, right? It might be only one or two are in that playoff run that want to make a move, like the Eagles in this case with the Titans. That's one thing. The second thing is I think it's, becoming hard for players to be able to immediately, adapt to a new system, adapt to their style of play. I think sometimes you see trades happen where, guys know the system. Cam Akers, for example, from the Rams, goes to the Vikings because he knows Kevin O'Connell's system. Kevin was there when they drafted him. So there's familiarity. It made sense. He wasn't working out with the Rams. They had Kyron Williams at the time starting for him. So it made sense. It has to make sense for both parties. It has to be an easy transition for that player. Otherwise, it becomes really difficult to really make the impact that I think that the team that's going for a playoff is looking for. and also get what you want back in return for the player that's trading on or moving on from that player.
Yeah, if you look at it, and I know you were probably about to bring this up, Will, like we've seen more defensive guys have impacts in trades. Now, we did see Christian McCaffrey, right? But I think he's more of an exception than the rule guy because at running back, I think Kyle did a masterful job in setting him up to make sure he was going to make plays. And he was the focal point of the offense. But we saw last year, right? We saw Roquan Smith, two totally different defenses, but he picked that defense up really quickly. And I think as a defensive player, right, the terminology is a little bit different, but the nuances of playing defense, I believe the transition is a little bit easier for defensive guys in the middle of the season to do it than offensive guys. Like we see Chase Claypool get traded, still hasn't really played that much in Miami. I know there's a few other names out there offensively. You talked about DeAndre Hopkins, maybe Derrick Henry potentially getting traded. I know Hunter Renfrow is another name. Danielle Hunter is a name, right? Because, Brady, you can speak to this. As a defensive lineman or a linebacker, if there's a certain package for you, right, before you learn the whole defense, there could be a set package for you that you learn that week that'll get you, up the speed in regards to what you need to do specifically for each team. Because each week you game plan for a different team, but there's always mainstays in the defense that a defensive coordinator will call, 3 or 4 times a game. So, like a guy like Danielle Hunter, say Jacksonville, we're looking great for him now. Minnesota winning, that's probably not going to happen. Right, we just need you to go get the quarterback, right? Every third down, we need you to do, right? And as we go on, we'll start adding more on your playbook, right? So I thought what Roquan Smith did last year was unheard of, right? For him to come in, not only come in right away, Brady, but get the green dot too, right? And call the defense, even though Patrick Quinn was there. That shows you what type of special player he is. So I think we just haven't seen any trades at the deadline because what Brady talked about, right? You got to think, if you're trading a veteran guy away, what does that say to the locker room? Have you given up on even? And are we getting the compensation worth this player leaving, right? I thought that was a steal by Howie Roseman, a 5th and 6th round pick, last all-pro safety, and it was a position of need, right? So if you're the Titans, yes, his deal is up after this year, so you get a little something back, but it's just like, with the way there's been so much up and down in the AFC, like you're technically still not out of it this early in the season. What does that do for the morale of guys like Danico Autry, guys like Jeffrey Simmons on the team when you trade one of those leaders away? It has to make sense. Seems like the Titans could potentially be on an all-in, tank situation right now. We'll see what happens after this week, though.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point as far as like situational players, and I think wide receivers, maybe defensive backs too. It's a little bit easier. You're only asked to do kind of certain things. Yes, your calls are going to be different, but like you bring in a wide receiver like Julio Jones, who granted not a trade, but recently signed by the Eagles. With his size, his abilities, played forever. He's probably a future Hall of Famer. You look at him and you just say like, yeah, dude, go run a go route, go run, slant, all that kind of stuff. Like, especially if you're a team that huddles, like you can just. Or if you're on that sideline, like what was the play call? Yeah, they'll just tell you right there. So it's you don't have to make it as complicated sometimes.
What we got on here,
it has to be. Yeah, exactly. Like just go ahead and have the sideline yell at him or signal him something. He'll figure it out.
I think the Derrick Henry thing is fascinating though because so I did Bill Barnwell's podcast earlier today, and we did hypothetical trades, like people who could get traded, and like man, you start to look around at, like the NFL and we mentioned that Baltimore and Cleveland could both make sense. Lost your starter, you lose J.K. Dobbins, you lose Nick Chubb, go get Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I pointed out to Bill, and that was Bill pointed that out. I countered by saying like you can make the case like Kansas City, Miami. I guess Jacksonville too, Buffalo, Philadelphia, Detroit. I mean, San Francisco would be a stretch, maybe, but like all these teams. I mean. Derrick Henry, like, go get Derrick Henry. Even if you're just blocking the Browns or the Ravens from getting him. Like, what if you Isaiah Pacheco's awesome. But, like, put Derrick Henry on the Chiefs or put Derrick Henry on the Bills. And, you're going to see a lot less too high safety looks if you got Derrick Henry running downhill on your defense or on that defense because they're going to have to step in and try to stop Derrick Henry. And that would open things up for the deep ball, particularly for Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen.
Well, you got to look at it like this too, right? And Brady, you know this too. A lot of teams, they don't want to trade somebody within the same conference, especially if you're going to see them
division
later on.
Conference,
or division for sure. Like division trades usually rarely happen. Honestly, if you're a player and somebody trades you within the division, that's disrespectful, right? Because you got to see them at least twice a year. So that's why the TJ Hawkinson thing like surprised me when Detroit traded him to Minnesota, because I'm like, y'all know y'all got to see this guy twice a year, right? Is that how y'all really feel about me? So every time I play them, that chip is going to be on my shoulder. You had no respect. You didn't even have enough respect to trade me in the same conference to another team. You traded me within the division, right? You know how disrespectful that is? So, the Carolina trading to San Fran, Carolina kind of knew they were out of it. So I think that one made sense. You saw Chicago, like, we're not trading him in the NFC. We're going to put Roquan Smith in the AFC. We don't want to see him at all. So I think that when you talk about Derrick Henry potentially going to like the Bills or another team in the AFC, you got to think about the GM and what that means in the future of potentially seeing Derrick Henry, on the other sideline.
Yeah. And remember, too, these are a lot of times players. Talk about Roquan Smith because we're kind of like heavy on him. Use this as an example. But I can guarantee you the Baltimore Ravens had a really high draft grade on him. I can guarantee you, like, they went back, they looked, they said, hey, this is a guy we'd love to have as a part of our organization. They get that second crack when they can trade for him, and then they can work out that extension for a long-term deal. Like, we kind of look at it sometimes trades as being like a one-year rental. Guy's on the last year of his deal. The team gets something back in return. A lot of times, the player standpoint, they're kind of like, hey, man, like, I'm being traded here. Like, make it worth my while. Let me stay here for a couple of years. So,
I need to deal.
Yeah, a lot of times it ends up being like the background and history that team has, really dating back to the time at the combine, interviews, maybe pro days, and speaking with the player and really saying, like, man, we're not going to have a chance to get this guy. We really wanted to in the draft, but the first crack we get, like, we feel like he'd be a good player for our team.
Brian Burns probably qualifies as a guy like that too, because you're talking about a 25-year-old pass rusher, borderline superstar edge guy, dudes. Like, I mean, there's got to be, if you're the Panthers, and Bill threw this out too, so I don't want to, like, double up on the podcast, but I think it's funny to think the Panthers go back like, hey, Chicago, you guys really need a pass rusher. You want to get rid of that first round pick that we've
the team they were in talks with last makes the most sense to me, the LA Rams, and they were probably willing to give up 2 firsts. If they're still willing to do that, if I'm the Panthers, I'm jumping on that now. Supposedly, I've heard some rumors that they offered him around 25 a year, but if you're Brian Burns and you look at the rest of the defense, there's a few players, Frankie Louvu, talk about Derek Brown, but you're the guy on this defense. So you've constantly been able to get around 10 sacks a year. No, 25 is not enough. I want 27, 28, $29 million because that's literally what they're paying pass rushers now. So I get him deciding not to, take a lesser deal because, one, you understand, you got a rookie quarterback. You guys have some money. You can spend it, right? You're not playing the quarterback position. So if I'm going to stay on this team and, have to withstand potentially losing for a year or two until we get this thing turned around, I need to be well compensated for it. So, honestly, if I'm the Rams, I think a lot of people are surprised by how they've played this year. Now, they definitely just had a big loss versus the Steelers. I thought they were going to pull that one out, but they didn't. They're competing in the NFC, right? And with that, the way Stafford's playing with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, I literally would reach back out to the Rams and be like, hey, we need one more pass rusher. We tried to not fleece you guys, but we tried to give you good, fair value for Brian Burns. You guys obviously haven't been able to work out a deal. Instead of having to deal with that in the future, why not let us have Brian Burns, right? So I think, honestly, the Rams should reach back out and see if they can get a deal done.
How about Jerry Jeudy, Brady?
It's funny.
Wilson?
Well, I mean, Russell Wilson. I know we got that out
Jerry,
there,
go Jerry Jeudy. Go Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a lot of teams who, do we count the Broncos in the playoff hunt? I'd probably say they're not going to be this year. And so it's probably tough for Jerry Jeudy, even that's the team that drafted him. You'd hope things would work out, but you got a lot of new ownership, new head coach, all those things. But I look at a team, and again, Dude's just touched on this. You're not going to trade him within the conference if you don't have to. You're not going to trade him within the division if you don't have to. I would think like the Chiefs would be a team that could use that sort of ability, right? Because even though I think last week you saw like the receiving group start to come along, he's still that guy that kind of has that number one potential to it. And you pair him with Travis Kelce, and that is just a difficult combination to stop. It almost makes it feel like the Chiefs would be unstoppable offensively. So I don't know what it would take to make that deal happen. But if you're the Broncos and you're like contemplating for moving on from him and you're just going to move on from him anyway in the future, why do you care that much where he goes, right? Yeah, if he's ultimately not good enough for you in the future, even if he does go to divisional opponents, like, well, yeah, that's fine. But, he wasn't good enough for us. We'd rather get some compensation back and go somewhere else. But I would think some teams that need the additional help at wide receiver could make some sense. I mean, I'd love to see him paired across from Stephon Diggs, with Josh Allen. Like, that would be a nasty nasty duo.
Get Judy and Derrick Henry.
Yeah. I mean, Derrick Henry's the other one. Like, that would be a fun place to go see him play. Just how more balanced out that offense would be running the football, even though they got James Cook. So,
can you imagine trying to tackle Derrick Henry in Buffalo in like January? Dude,
it would just be pain. Just
pain. I would die. I would spontaneously combust. Dudes, what about Budda Baker in Arizona?
Yeah, we'll talk about Budda Baker, but I just want to hit on the Derrick Henry to Buffalo. Let's not forget my guy Deion Dawkins just restructured his contract to free up some money. So I think something could potentially be in the work. I think it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball. Honestly, Brady Quinn, you talked about, the way James Cook has played this year. I think Latavius Murray is giving them a little juice at running back. I don't think they're going to add to the running back position. But linebacker, when they lost Matt Milano, they lost a lot, right? Yep. And I think Dorian Williams just went down last week. I think they're going to be in the market for a linebacker. I know we talked about Frankie Louvu potentially being a guy. I think he makes a lot of sense. Depending if the Panthers, he's free after this year, depending on if the Panthers want to get, trade him away. I think he'd be a great fit.
A lot of connections, a lot of connections with Carolina and Buffalo too.
Correct, for sure. Sean McDermott coming from Carolina. Yep. But the Budda Baker one, it's interesting, right? Because he potentially asked to be traded in the offseason. They gave him an extension. So I don't know if he's honestly going anywhere, because I don't think you give a guy an extension and then just trade him that same year. I mean, has it happened before? I'd have to go back and look at history, maybe. But I think Budda Baker is going to be part of the turnaround there, right? You don't just trade away talented players, especially if you don't know what you're going to get in return for them. They just gave him an extension. That new team would have to be willing to take on that new money as well, which, again, he's a great player. So I know there's probably some teams that would be willing to do it. I think a team that would have probably been willing to do it was the Eagles, but they traded for Kevin Byard, right? So I don't think Budda Baker's going anywhere, honestly.
Yeah, and if you're Jonathan Gannon, like, he's one of the players that, as a defensive mind, like, you're like, no, I need this. I need him on my team.
Need him around.
That's the guy I want on my team. Like, we build around that guy. So I think that like plays a small part too, right? When you have a new head coach and he's looking at the roster saying, like, yeah, that guy's not going anywhere.
And a new GM who's like, look, I don't want to suck forever. Like, we keep Budda around. Okay, let's take a break.
Players on this roster.
Did London break the Buffalo Bills, who play on Thursday night? We will tell you coming up next. The Buffalo Bills hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Thursday Night Football. It's amazing how, I love it. Like, look, it's great for business. The NFL is constantly here, but it's like, oh man, week 7. It's like, all right, week 7. Let's everybody take a breath. And it's just week 8 already. That's life. That's the biz. It's popular sport.
Last week was rough trying to predict games, right? And like,
Did you see Ryan Wilson? Did you see Ryan Wilson?
Impressive.
Vegas loved last week.
Impressive.
0-13 against the spread last week. Very nice, Ryan.
Not many people can do that. Okay, like easily hard to do or difficult to do. 13-0 is 0-13.
Impossible.
You could try to. It's like really hard to do. So
if you
Ryan.
Yeah, if you told somebody, I'll give you $1,000 if you go winless against the spread, it would take them years to do it. Like you're basically picking. You're like you can't go. It's not easy. You can't be like, oh, I know what all the winners are. Like you accidentally win a few games against the spread every week. Like bad.
Facts.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's just start off with this matchup, right? The line right now is what 8.5 for Buffalo.
8.5. Bills minus 8.5.
I mean, Leger,
this has gone up a point.
I think it's been about this for a little while.
I think it's.
It was 7.5.
Would you agree, though, that this point in time in the season, into week 8, short week, home team has a distinct advantage? Is that fair to say?
You broke up. Say that last part again.
Home team has a distinct advantage.
Home team, distinct advantage this far.
Yeah, for sure. Especially around this time of year. Yeah.
So I see this line. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like 8.5.
So many points.
Buffalo just lost to New England. And I was kind of surprised by that, right? New England had both edge rushers out in Uche, and obviously Judon's been out. And it's kind of, you're looking at going, all right, like didn't see that happening.
No.
And then for Tampa struggled the past couple of weeks, which I didn't know what kind of season they would have to start the season. But then once it got going, like I was like, all right, Baker's like got something to prove. He's lighting the world on fire. They've struggled the past couple of weeks, and it really kind of leaves you questioning like how these two teams are going to match up. Maybe I'm the fish. Maybe I'm the one on the hook here, but I would take the points at Tampa. Now, that doesn't mean that Bills don't win by 7 or 8, but 8.5, like, I think it's a closer game. I think a lower scoring game too. I know Vita Vea's got a groin injury he's dealing with. He might not be 100% or might not go. Yeah. Chris Godwin's got the head injury. Like, there's some things where I think you look at that and go, all right, but Ed Oliver might not go. Dawson Knox is looking doubtful for this game. So it leads me to say, like, lower scoring game, maybe the better play, but I'll take the 8.5 points and then a little tighter game between these two teams.
I mean, the Bills were rolling when they went to London. They just smoked the Dolphins and beaten the Raiders and the Commanders. Go to London on that short trip, lose to the Jaguars, and everybody's like, oh, well, maybe it was just a travel. They come back, almost lose to the Giants at home in prime time on Sunday night. And then it's like, okay, well, now they're gonna straighten things up against New England. They beat New England 6 out of the last 7, 5-2 against the spread, regardless of where it is, including the playoffs. And then they go and just lose outright to Mac Jones and a really bad Patriots team. And then they come home on a Thursday night and the spread's 8.5. Like, to me, this is like Vegas knows something here, and it's that Buffalo is going to curb stomp the Bucs. That's where I'm at.
So it's funny because we had been talking about how the under had been hitting so well, especially on Thursday night. And Brady, you talked about it. You're like, right around this time, the scoring will come. And sure enough, right, last Thursday, Saints, Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm all in on the under, because if you look at what the Saints have done, right, and in the history of what they've done, the under hit like every game for like 13 straight games. And then, of course, they go way over the line last week versus Jacksonville Jaguars. So you look at this game, right? Same scenario, right? The Bills' offense has struggled the last 2 weeks, coming out a little sleepy. The Bucs have put up 13, 14 points a game. So you're like, that under probably is going to hit. And then watch, we'll go out there and both teams put up 30 points, right? So that's just what's going to happen. But if you look at this, if you look at the Buffalo Bills, right, things that they've struggled with, right, their linebackers have struggled in coverage this year. And that was kind of what Matt Milano did better than any other linebacker in football, right? If you just look at last week, Brady, down the seams, anytime they were able to put a slot guy or a tight end in coverage versus one of their guys, Patriots and Mac Jones were eating them alive. Like, it was bad. And we talked about this pass rush. We thought Von Miller would come along, and I know we talked about this earlier in the week, Brady, but it just doesn't seem like he's healthy enough, right? I believe he plays like 4 or 5 snaps last week, came out of that game. So the pass rush hasn't been there. Ed Oliver was out last week. We'll see. He looks like he may be able to go Thursday. But Daquan Jones being out, Julius White being out, Matt Milano, like, that's really hurt this defense. And Josh Allen has notoriously been really good against the blitz, except for the last 2 weeks. If you look at the film, he just refuses to throw to the open guy, knowing that the blitz is coming and the first read is there and it's open. He's really struggled with that the last 2 weeks. Well, we know Todd Bowles, Brady Quinn. What is he going to do? Bring pressure. That's what he does. And Tampa Bay has struggled when they brought pressure and gone zone. When they brought pressure and gone man, they've actually played pretty well. So those are some of the things I'm looking for in this game. Will Josh Allen have an answer and do what he notoriously does? Plays well against the blitz. He hasn't done it the last 2 weeks. And then on defense, they got to figure something out, because not only has the linebacker struggled, Taron Johnson, who was a really good player in the slot position, he struggled the last couple of weeks as well. Literally, the Bills could have lost 3 games in a row because of their defense at the end of games.
What about the Bills' offense, Brady? I mean, not exactly lighting the world on fire either.
No, and I think early on we thought that, they're going to have more of a consistent running game. And I think that there was moments and times you watched, you said, okay, like, this is the evolution of maybe what Ken Dorsey wants to do with the offense. They drafted Dalton Kincaid. You've got Dawson Knox. You've got Gabe Davis. You got Stephon Diggs. You got James Cook and a healthy stable of backs that, could be that. And I just don't think it's evolved into that. I'm not sure if it's just due to maybe some of the injuries or maybe some inconsistencies based on the matchups and what they'd like to do. But that still feels like it's ironing itself out. And the reality is, again, like, not a lot of teams play their guys in preseason anymore. We got 3 preseason games. It's not really something we do. So I think it's taking longer into the season for offenses to find their identity and what they're good at. I was talking about this earlier today in talking about the Giants. Even though it's Tyrod Taylor at quarterback now, at wide receiver, they've kind of solidified and landed on, hey, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt. Like, we've got kind of different roles for those guys. And obviously Waller is the most dynamic or the best maybe out of that group in the sense of just his size, athleticism at the tight end spot and a mismatch. But they've kind of solidified themselves in that. And I think it's helped. Like the past couple of weeks, their offenses look better, even though they didn't score much last week. They only scored 14 points. But still, like, considering their offensive line issues, and again what they're going up against with a backup quarterback, it's been better. I think they're finding themselves in a better place. So there's a lot of examples of that. I think Kansas City too. Last week, and you watched them kind of go up and down the field and how well Mahomes played. Like the wide receivers are starting to kind of get in their rhythm of how it works and where they fit in. And I think you're going to start to see that too from the Bills as we move forward. This is such a hard game to handicap with me because like my concerns about the Bucs defense going up against the Bills offense is I think the Bills will have a hard time running the football, but I think they'll be able to throw and take advantage of some big plays downfield. So then it comes down to Todd Bowles and like how they go about playing maybe some soft coverage, limiting and forcing Josh Allen not to want to do that. Like, I don't think he wants to be patient. Does that force him into some, poor decisions, things of that nature? We'll find out. We'll find out in this matchup. But I just think it's still a work in progress for what this year's team, their identity offensively is still going to be.
All right. So who you guys got?
I said earlier, I'm taking the points.
I think Brady made a really good point, right? I think Josh Allen at times he plays Superman football, and if you look at his history, right, he has done well against the blitz except for the last 2 weeks. It's when his three-man rush, like you talked about, Brady, gets a little impatient and try to force the ball down the field. And the thing about Josh Allen, he feels like with his arm talent, he can make any play, even if it's 3rd and 17. We saw it last week, right? They score a touchdown. I think they get a holding penalty, call it back. He scrambles to the right and literally tries to force the ball down the field like 20 yards on 3rd and goal from like the 17-yard line. No situation, Brady. The red zone's condensed. There's not a lot of plays for 3rd and 17 in the red zone. So sometimes you just got to take the points, right? But he's a guy that feels like with his arm talent and his athletic ability, he can make every single play. So I would love to see what Todd Bowles is going to do just because he has struggled against the blitz the last 2 weeks. Does he do more 3-4-man rushes? Shaq Barrett's starting to come on, had a sack fumble last week versus the Atlanta Falcons. Does he let that defensive line really try to get off, and Kalijah Cansey played really well last week too. So could he do more cover 2 and make Josh Allen be patient, right? I'm with Brady, man. I know that the line is crazy at 8.5, and maybe Vegas does know something. I just think this is going to be a low-scoring game, right? I believe the Bills have really struggled. And you talked about Dawson Knox. He's out, right? He's going to be out for a while. So that's another injury that they sustain, right? How do they overcome that again, too? Dalton Kincaid has been really good in the offense. He's learned how to really meet up with Josh Allen in certain zone coverages. They've had a really nice rapport. But Dawson Knox is always the guy he trusts, right? That's the guy he really trusts. So that's a big loss for them. I think this is going to be a close game. Honestly, like the Bucs. Give me the plus 8.5.
All right, you guys are taking the Bucs. I'm taking the Bills. That'll do it.
Yeah, I knew he would. I knew he would.
And we're the Bills. Yeah. It's actually a Durham Bulls.
The Bills are Bulls.
It's a Bulls, but it kind of looks like Bills, right? Like if it was a
lot of things.
Yeah,
I'm still waiting on my hat, by the way. You lost a bet. You never sent me the Brinson Sucks hat.
We will work on getting the Brinson Sucks hat. But for now, that's the end of the show. Make sure to join us tomorrow for more NFL coverage. Our picks show for week 8. Remember to like, comment, subscribe on the YouTube page. If you're listening to the audio-only version, download, follow, leave a 5-star review. Tell your friends. For news for Brady, I'm Brinson. We'll see you guys later.